You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Mysterious website tied to top Republican pushes major court change, based on an article by Clay Wirestone, Kansas Reflector. Anonymous propaganda, Democratic friction, borrowed authority. A Kansas vote on judicial selection is being sold through a website that hides who made it, who paid for it, and why it exists. That is the story. The rest is camouflage. The site wraps itself in the borrowed prestige of William Allen White, imitates the plain authoritative look of a public information service, and then pretends to be a neutral civic guide while pushing a clear political line. Who actually has power? The people with agency here are not confused readers or abstract voices in the debate. They are Josh Ney, a Republican-linked lawyer who incorporated the groups behind the site and the network around him. The ad buy, the public advocacy, the social amplification by Republican officials, and the strategic decision to leave the operation anonymous while the amendment vote approached. That matters because anonymity is not a neutral design choice. It is a power move. It lets a faction speak as if it were infrastructure rather than advocacy. It lets a political campaign dress itself in the clothing of public service, and then claim innocence when voters mistake one for the other. The whitewash. The site's use of William Allen White is not homage. It is appropriation. White was a named editor who signed his work and owned his politics. This operation quotes him inaccurately, strips out attribution, and then uses his reputation as a credibility shield for a message produced by unnamed hands. That is the basic trick. Take a public-minded Kansas econ, flatten his actual history into a slogan, and use his name to launder a partisan campaign. The quote is not just misrendered. It is deployed as borrowed moral authority for a project that refuses to identify itself cleanly. Manufactured neutrality. The framing is misleading in the specific way political misdirection usually is. Bland surfaces, loaded purpose. The site's title sounds like an official public information service. Its helpful resources page omits Chris Kobach while listing other officials. It links out to familiar Kansas institutions, including Sunflower Journeys, to create the impression of civic legitimacy. It tells viewers to trust Ballotpedia, not because it values neutrality, but because it wants the aura of neutrality without the burden of transparency. That is not public education. It is persuasion wrapped in bureaucratic aesthetics. And when Rep. Adam Smith and the Cowley County Republican Party reshared it as authoritative, they did exactly what anonymous propaganda depends on. They converted camouflage into reach. The real political pattern. This is not a one-off oddity. It is a familiar Republican tactic in states where direct democratic processes still exist and still threaten elite control. If you cannot win cleanly, on the merits, obscure the messenger. If you cannot persuade voters openly, mimic an institution. If the substance is unpopular, bury the authorship. Ney can, of course, argue for changing Kansas's court selection process. He has made his case in interviews, testimony, a law review article, and a rotary speech. That is what honest advocacy looks like. Name, argument, record. The anonymous website is the opposite. It is political speech trying to pass as civic fact. Kansas deserves a name. The deeper issue is not a misquoted journalist or a sloppy resource page. It is the deliberate collapse of accountability into branding. A faction with access to money, lawyers, media, and party machinery can hide behind the language of information while steering voters toward a constitutional change that affects fundamental rights. That is the systemic problem. Power that will speak loudly, but not openly. Campaign operations that want the authority of institutions without their responsibility. And a political culture that keeps rewarding concealment as long as it is effective. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Leibertz, our thanks for listening.